think we should start. Hi, everyone. My name is John Elbi. I'm a partner at Nahmani Grunder. We are a multifamily office based in Switzerland. It's a great pleasure to be with Ronnie on the stage today.
Hey.
Thanks, Ronnie, for coming. I see Ronnie as one of the key visionary technologists of our times. He's already a two-time entrepreneur and is now working on his next company, which continues to be in stealth mode. Hopefully we'll learn more about it, or a bit about it today.
Yeah.
He's founded two companies already. The first one was Mako Surgical, which he founded in 2004. The company was sold in 2013 to Stryker. He later on went to create Magic Leap, which sparked the true AR revolution when it was founded in the early 2010s. I think we're going through the most exciting times in technology. There are two concurrent technology paradigm shifts that are taking place at the same time. On the one hand, we seem to be at the cusp of the next computing platform, the next access node after the desktop and mobile, the so-called spatial computer. And on the other hand, we have Gen AI and the emergence of large language models as the next operating system, such that the whole tech stack is being rewired. In Sam Altman's own words, the right way to think about their models is a reasoning engine and not a fact database. So we're going from pure information retrieval to getting answers and actions from machines. And this whole convergence of these two paradigm shifts is exactly what we're going to address with Ronnie today. Ronnie, I remember very vividly when I visited you in the Magic Leap offices in Florida in 2018. You took me into this new immersive 3D world while I didn't really have to move away from this analog physical world that we always find ourselves in. I remember playing chess with you, actually with your hologram.
Yeah.
When we were sitting and actually we were playing chess while being in two separate rooms. But I was constantly in touch with your hologram. And again, that was just revolutionary at the time. As one of the pioneers of AR, how would you define spatial computing? How far away are we from moving away from these 2D mobile devices? And what form factor will this take? Just to start off.
That's a great question. So think of spatial computing as computing moving from the 2D flat world of your laptop, your phone, and at least the way I thought of it is computing everywhere, all around you in space. So that your movement, your body, objects, the entire environment became like a new desktop. And I think the form factor we have here, this was, if you're a geek like me, from Iron Man, he puts on a pair of like, what really looked like Magic Leap type glasses at the time. And we were working with Disney, so it was probably not a complete coincidence. And then Spider-Man gets to use them in one of the movies too. But basically, I really believe we're going to end up at a form factor like this. And what's interesting is like that opens up the door for all day, every day kind of computing that's thoughtless. If you have to put something on your head, which is where some of the world is today, that weighs, 700-800 grams, that's not the all day, every day kind of computing we're thinking about. But in my mind, true spatial computing is when we approach this kind of form factor that senses the world, senses you, and just in a thoughtless way, you could just wake up, put it on like I put on my glasses, you put on sunglasses, weighs very little, insanely powerful, has edge computing capability in the device, and connected through 5G, 6G, gigabit up and down to all kinds of edge and other servers. That's what it's going to look and feel like, and that will completely change everything. And then obviously we're going to talk about what happens when AI gets commingled with that.
Exactly. I think, before we get to that, on the other side, the other concurrent shift is just AI. I think we're in the initial stages of this wave. We seem to be in the initial stage moving in the direction of this centralized, general purpose, horizontal model. I know you have a very different philosophical view to how AI should look like and should be like. Can you take us through to your vision and also maybe talk about your next venture?
Yeah, we'll go into that a little bit. Let's start with the fundamental philosophy, and I think it's actually one of the most critical questions of our time, not just in tech, but in society. So one of the things happening is a lot of capital has been poured into what I'd call central autocracy forms of computing and central autocratic AI, a giant brain that sucks all the data, the entire internet, everything, controlled by a handful of companies. And those companies who have been gathering your data for the last 20 years are under the belief that we're going to hand over all the know-how from Fortune 2000 and governments to them as well. And to some extent, they were right. The consumer world and the business world, without really knowing what they were doing, consciously or unconsciously, handed over almost all the important data that allowed these companies to train gigantic AI models, which are now in position to take your know-how and capability. So the question is, like, is the future a central autocratic form of AI, which, I sort of think about these giant monoliths, and what are the issues with that? And this is the philosophy John and I have been talking about for a while. Monolithic systems that have very little transparency, almost no transparency. They have unpredictability. They have uncontrollability. They hallucinate. And the design of them, it's like, I think of them as like nuclear reactors. Like, you can make a nuclear reactor safer, but it's still always going to be a nuclear reactor with the potential for the internal chaos because of the unknowability of what's going on the inside. The alternative is an interesting one, which is, what does democratic computing look like? What does decentralized AI look like? Is that a better future for the world? Obviously, you could see what side I'm on, but I think that's a core topic, and I think the technology will drive society here. I think what's really critical is that more centrally autocratic societies will drive towards central autocratic computing. What's interesting in the United States, we are giving birth to the central autocratic computing philosophies. Our companies are influencing autocratic governments because the way they operate as companies is actually influencing outside the United States. Oh, let's just run our whole country that way. These are more dictatorship companies that centralize and organize everything. So in a weird way, some of our companies have been influencing non-democratic behaviors outside the United States.
So in your vision of AI, how should this be evolving? So to go from this from horizontal to vertical AI in the enterprise, what are the problems you want to solve?
Well, first of all, I think the enterprise, and I've spent a lot of time with, like, I would say at this point, maybe not quite 200, but close to 200 Fortune 2000 companies and some governments. And first of all, they're incredibly complex systems. And when you think about going in there and bringing in like a gigantic monolith, the idea of like this big thing, you're just shoving it into the organization. First of all, it's very disturbing to the team. The cultural integration is very difficult. And I had a lot of this experience at Mako where we were bringing robotics and AI into the operating room. And there was terrible fear. Actually, I'm going to go through that just for a second, because what really overcame the fear at Mako was, I think half of Silicon Valley watches 2001 and thought we should build HAL, right? But I was like a Star Wars geek, and I'm like, what is the metaphor that people are built in understanding? Like R2 and 3PO, they helped you. They weren't trying to take over the world. They weren't killing people. They were sort of like the helpers. And we designed a robot that really was influenced a bit by R2 as much as we could. And it collaborated, and it became a team member, and it had its place, and its place wasn't big, it was small. And instead of taking away a job, it added jobs. Instead of like reducing the economics of hospitals, it added to the economics of hospitals. And the interesting thing I could tell you guys today is like there was a huge proof point. And the proof point that I was trying to tell people back then, but they didn't believe me, and now it's there 100%, is that people now have parties with their robot. They have birthday cakes. They name them everywhere around the world. There's like thousands of sites. So to me, it was like this interesting arc that I can now look back and say, look what happened. Now, there's an arc of AI that can work this way, where AIs can find their way into businesses in this like small, friendly, cooperative way, right? Much more decentralized, democratic way. Or we have this alternative, which I showed you before, which is a lot more like HAL from 2001. Unfortunately, a ton of capital is going this way. Obviously, I'm philosophically in the view that while it's powerful, it is the wrong approach for society. I also think it's a difficult approach for enterprise, because you cannot target very specific, tiny little things within an organization. It has all these complex processes and cultural relationships and social relationships. We realized that half of the Mako robot was the cultural social integration. There's like zero cultural social integration when you bring in a gigantic brain that says it's smarter than everyone, and the CEO sometimes tell you it's going to kill everyone's job. Like, that's not a cultural social integration. So I think we have to work really hard to find the EQ, the social integration, and the super targeted way to bring AI into enterprises. And we're having a number of interesting behind-the-scenes conversations at Synthbees with CEOs. We have our first major customer, really before we took any venture funding, with a giant aerospace company. And this hyper-targeted way of integrating and reducing fear has become incredibly important. So kind of the Mako philosophy, I think, is an important one, because it's one of the few AIs that has actually integrated at scale in mission-critical situations where life and death matters with incredibly high reliability, and it's done like close to 1.5 million surgeries. So it's not like a lab experiment from a genius, from a hyperscaler that says, let's go put this out in the world and see what happens. Right? We're reading in the news over the last year what's happening. Like, chaotic things are going on with some of the biggest players in AI. What happens when you continue to scale that? Now your aircraft is built that way, trains are run that way, governments are run that way. So the hope of AI could really be an issue, my view, is if we go this direction.
So just to take that a step deeper, so in your vision with SynthB, effectively, and if there are 3 vectors to generative AI in terms of models, data, and compute, talk to us a bit more in detail as to the way you want to structure your business, please.
I have to be careful because we're still in stealth mode.
I know.
You're doing a really good job of getting me to come out on the ledge a little bit. But one of the key things is like, and I'll talk about the convergence, like, can an individual be amplified by AI? The short answer is 100% yes. And then can an individual have a collaborative relationship with AI? I think 100% will say yes. So let me walk you through. This is just a visual and a metaphor, but I think this one's really interesting. And it's an experiment I got to do, and it's just more of a philosophical relationship that you could think about. This we did early and magically, but here's an AI sitting across the table interacting with a human being. So the first thing was, you're like, oh my God, I'm seeing an AI. It's not this thing in a box. Like, there was a visual of an AI. And I think what was very interesting is, like, this AI we built was all about EQ. And we probably had 10, 20,000 people meet Micah, but I think what's interesting there, John, it was very local. She looked you in the eye and spent time reading your EQ. We had can't talk about how we did, but we had this whole way of reading your emotional state, and she would play that back and mirror it back until we could tell that your emotional state got happy because we could sense you. This is spatial computing. So this was an example of spatial computing and AI converging. We were reading your emotional state, your heart rate, your breathing, and Micah was adjusting that, just like a really high EQ person. And for all the people we showed this to, they had never had an experience like that. It was like, wait, AI could be something very human. Yeah. And I think that was like an interesting thread from what I learned at Mako. Like, make it come to us as human beings. We don't want to deal with these alien foreign objects. And you think about like what this might look like in an enterprise, like very local, very personal, very friendly, something that you can count on and trust. All the parts of the human being matter here: the EQ, the visual side, the sensing, the relationship you can have. These things are almost all gone in a lot of the AI discussions. It's all math theory, right? But we don't think about the neuron biochemistry theory when you and I are talking. We operate as human beings on a very different level, and I think that's being missed by the majority of AI companies right now.
If you look at the state of markets today, I think most investors see spatial computing and AI as 2 distinct worlds, and it seems like it's either or. I mean, probably Meta and Zuckerberg is probably one of the few who's seeing where this is going. As these 2 worlds collide and converge, just why don't you give us some state predictions as to how things will look?
Yeah, and by the way, John and I spoke about state prediction, which is nailing time is difficult, but describing a set of parameters that create a state, and when you see those parameters come together, the state occurs, I think is a better thing for prediction. So number one, the number of factors to really create the small form factor wearable spatial computing, it's all there. I worked on it for over a decade. We had multiple generations that we never showed in public in the lab. I have a really good sense of what's happening at Apple and Meta. Hundreds of people that used to work for me are at those companies. So we are going to get, let me just go back here. So one state prediction is we're absolutely going to get here. And here means something very light, incredibly high resolution, that you can wear in a thoughtless way. But that's going to be connected to powerful computing. And what does that powerful computing mean? It's going to see what you see, sense what you see, know you in a way that like your wife, your spouse, your partner, your best friends know you, and even more. It'll know you better than you. And when you take it off, it'll be like losing vision. Your IQ will drop hundreds of points. And this idea of AI and a person coming together in this very intimate way, where it begins to understand everything you like, everything you do, makes your job better. Let's say, John, someone asks you about the price of coal in Romania in 1932. You know that instantly. Let's say you're about to eat a piece of chocolate cake that you're not supposed to do it. It'll say 250 calories, you put it down, but it's like, well, if you go walk around the Palisades for 25 minutes, we can have the cake. All right, let's do it. So all this kind of thing where you have this like your own Jarvis. I mean, if you watch, we really have this Jarvis that lives with us across multiple devices, but the one that's most intimate is the one where it sees what you see, hears you, senses you. Instead of something that you have to hold out here and think about, just always with you is going to be part of our life. Will it be in 2028? Will it be in 2032? But I would say we are within, I'm going to break my rule about the time prediction. We are within the decade of this happening. And I'm one of the people that knows how to build that, and I'm guessing that the folks at Apple and Meta have enough folks to understand that. So we're not talking a long time away. And this convergence of AI power with spatial computing will be a revolution in people, because you will no longer be a single FTE. You will be capable of like almost superhuman activities. And that's going to be interesting. Like a single person can now do a lot more. A blue-collar worker will have the knowledge skill of like 10 Ivy League individuals while they're still working with their body physically. And like, what is that going to mean for the future of work? What's that going to mean for the employees? And what's that going to mean for people who are in tech-deprived parts of the world? Like, we're going to separate in ways that are very hard to predict, where sort of the tech-enabled, AI-powered, converged people will feel like we've evolved almost into a sort of different species. And it's going to be a really interesting challenge to deal with the global economics, because the earning power of someone who can do that will be so much higher. The intelligence and IQ level will be off the charts, and a regular human being will feel like they're drifting off, and it'll be like the Neanderthals. So I think we're entering a very interesting place, and now is the time for government and companies to start to think about how do you address that in your company and the ecosystem you live in.
The whole notion of the human brain amplified by AI.
100%. I mean, this is a very interesting thing, because we have folks who are, wanting to put brain-computer interfaces in a body, right? And I think, sure, I won't name them. I'm actually advised a couple companies on that, but I think there's softer, more passive, more human ways to amplify our brain without fundamentally changing it. But I will say this, all the ways I've thought about, whether it's BCI direct or with spatial computing, our brain will change. We're entering an era where we are becoming a different kind of human. And it's because AI has this ability right now to pass our capabilities as human, and spatial computing is going to give us superhuman sensing. Like the sensing of all these different advanced animals and creatures, seeing infrared, seeing through walls, ability to sense and hear things we can't hear, and see spectrums you can never hear, combined with intelligence that we can't muster as an individual human. That's now going to be wrapped around an individual person. So what does that mean to you, to a company, and how are folks going to leverage that both in good ways and bad ways? We have to think about both sides.
And the whole future of knowledge workers and what that does too.
Yeah, well, we talked about this. So this is a state prediction, but if you're a white-collar knowledge worker, you're in real trouble. I think the data analyst, if you sit behind a desk in front of a laptop, your job is pretty much, you're like dead man walking. I actually think the blue-collar worker, the tech amplified, the spatial AI convergent blue-collar worker, like the paramedic, you work with your body, the surgeon in a room, a nurse, a pediatric oncologist, they're going to have their thing. The field operator. But if you're sitting behind a desk, typing away at a keyboard, the chances of you still having a job, whether you're a BCG or McKinsey partner or whether you're an accounting person, I think there's real issues because AI is so good at detecting those patterns and understanding the data that's coming from there. And there may be like little brick walls that we put up, but I feel like all those walls are eventually going to break. The AI waterfall is so intense in the free market. Its capabilities are going to be so strong. I think anything you do to break that, the river is going to come. So might as well figure out how, where's the water going and how do I reshape society and what I do as a company around that. All the measures of like putting up sandbags, I think, are temporary.
You and I have been talking about these things for more than a year now.
Yes.
And I knew that we were going to hit this point. And that's why I asked Ronnie, I said, look, I would love you to put up a closing remark that we can all leave this room with. So, and I think you prepared one. So if you can.
I did, when I get it right. So I wrote it down to make sure. So best closing remark I could come up with in the last couple of days. But it is something that John and I have talked about. So I think the spatial AI shift is really going to challenge what it means for us to be human beings. But in that change, I think we're going to have to work incredibly hard and together as people to hold on to our humanity. And that's not only our intelligence, right? It's your EQ, it's your family, it's your soul, these things that are not being grabbed by the computer. So I think holding on to our humanity in the face of all these amazing technical changes will probably be the most important challenge of the next few decades.
Thank you very much, Ronnie.
Thank you.
It was a great session.